At this time, the chair recognizes Congressman Mike Johnson. Congressman Johnson represents Louisiana's 4th Congressional District. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Committee on the Judiciary. Congressman Johnson, you're recognized, sir, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Stile, Ranking Member Davis of the full committee, all my distinguished colleagues who serve on this subcommittee. This is an important one. We're really grateful. Wish you all a Merry Christmas. Thank you for having this hearing. Look, I think every member of Congress would agree that the processes put in place for the 2020 election ultimately sowed a lot of doubt into the minds of millions of Americans about the integrity of the vote in this country. Under the pretext of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in many cases at the last possible moment, many governors, secretaries of state political parties, judges, other actors went around the constitutional authority of state legislatures to set new parameters for how the election would be administered within their states. The glaring problem with all of that is that it was contrary to the express language of the Constitution itself. For example, in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, it is the state legislatures only that are entrusted with the integrity of our unique election system, and they're given the exclusive authority of directing the manner of appointing presidential electors for the Electoral College. As the Supreme Court itself affirmed almost 130 years ago in McPherson v. Blacker, that power is, quote, placed absolutely and wholly with the legislatures, and it can never be taken away nor abdicated, unquote. All of those unprecedented and unconstitutional changes in 2020 led to widespread irregularities that undermined Americans' faith in our institutions. And that's the real threat here. So how did congressional Democrats respond? Well, they doubled down on that usurpation of state power by reintroducing H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 from the last Congress. As we know, H.R. 1 would nationalize elections, centralize election administration in Washington, D.C., which again is a direct violation of the plain language of the Constitution. Remember that Article 1, Section 4 gives the states their primary role in determining their registration and voting practices. H.R. 1 would provide no excuse absentee voting with virtually no verification of the voter's identity. It would automatically give felons the right to vote. It would require increased disclosure requirements for only certain political donors, which likely violates the First Amendment and would chill free speech of countless Americans. It would empower the IRS to launch politically motivated investigations against conservative groups, and among many other things, would make pandemic-specific election reforms, all the chaos that was created last year, it would make that permanent. All these policies are terribly misguided, but perhaps the most egregious provision in H.R. 1, the one that will really alarm the American people when they figure this out, are those that would provide taxpayer funding for political campaigns. I mean, think of it. The bill creates a 6-to-1 government match of any contributions valued at $200 or less for congressional and presidential campaigns. So to put it in simple terms, every $200 contribution, the federal government will provide up to $1,200. You heard that correctly. Our Democrat colleagues want to take your tax dollars and use that money, folks, everybody watching back home, to fund campaigns of candidates across the country, regardless of whether or not you want that or would agree with them on the issues most important to you. The tax dollars of pro-life individuals, for example, could be sent to pro-abortion candidates. Second Amendment advocates would be funding the campaigns of gun control candidates, and the list goes on and on. So on its own, H.R. 1 would send chills down the spine of every American who believes in the foundational structure of our election system. But that's not all Democrats are proposing to do. H.R. 4 is a whole other can of worms. Democrats attempt to orchestrate yet another radical and unprecedented federal power grab over state-administered elections, this time under the guise of updating the Voting Rights Act. Upon its enactment in 1965, the VRA employed extraordinary measures to address pervasive state resistance to removing radically discriminatory barriers that did prevent minorities from exercising their right to vote. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Shelby County v. Holder recognized an obvious fact, however, when it examined the Voting Rights Act, and it concluded that things have changed dramatically, of course, since 1965. That should be celebrated. The court reasoned that requiring states to pre-clear election law changes based on conduct a half century ago was an unconstitutional invasion of state sovereignty. Republicans are thrilled that the VRA worked. We all are. The truth is that more Americans from minority communities are voting now than ever before, and overall voter registration remains high. This is a great achievement. In fact, voter registration disparities between minority and non-minority voters in states like Texas and Florida, North Carolina, Mississippi, my home state of Louisiana, listen, are below the national average. And they're actually lower than Democrat-run states like New York, California, and President Biden's home state of Delaware. However, Democrats would have you think otherwise. They want to bring preclearance back through H.R. 4 and have states seek approval from Merrick Garland's Justice Department before making any changes to election laws or redistricting. Again, this is a blatant federal power grab, and we shouldn't stand for it. Both H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 are contrary to the founders' intent, the plain text of the Constitution, and if they were ever fully implemented, they would further erode Americans' faith and confidence in our institutions. Y'all, listen, the fabric of our republic is becoming worn and frayed because of all this, and I remain hopeful that the people of our country will see these political charades for what they really are and rise up to make their voices heard. I do thank the chair and the ranking members for allowing me to testify this morning. Wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I yield back.
And we do thank you as well, Congressman Johnson. Thank you for your testimony.